Just one more small reading. The Son of Wisdom. Examination of Self and Phenomena. Page 112. Examination of Self and Phenomena. In the Sutras, the Buddha taught form is empty of the self of the individual and the self of phenomena. The statement here is specifically made with regard to form, but it actually applies to every one of the inconceivable number of phenomena that there are. In this chapter, Nagarjuna proves its validity with logical reasoning. All the Buddha's teachings on emptiness can be included in the description of selflessness of individuals and the selflessness of phenomena. The two types of selfness are emptiness are the focus of the 18th chapter, and therefore it's like the heart of the entire text. Nagarjuna composed this chapter in response to the people who asked it. If mental afflictions, if actions, actors, and so forth are all false appearances, then what's the true nature of reality after all? To answer this question, Nagarjuna explains the two types of selflessness that are the essence of genuine reality. The first four verses and the first line of the fifth are an exceptionally clear explanation of the selflessness of the individual. The first verse reads, if the self were the aggregates, it would be something that arises and ceases. If the self were something other than the aggregates, it would not have the aggregates' characteristics. In the chapter 10, examination of the fire and firewood, Nagarjuna analyzed the five possible relationships between the self and the aggregates. Here, those five are condensed into the two that form their essence. The question is if the self exists is the same as or different from the five aggregates that compose the individual body mind. First, the self cannot be the same as the aggregates, because if it were, it would arise and cease just as the aggregates do. For example, just as the parts of the body arise and cease moment by moment, so the self would be born and die moment by moment. Just as feelings change every instance, so the self would only last one instance and then be replaced by another self. Furthermore, if the self were the aggregates, then just as the aggregates are many in number, so there would be that many selves. Each part of the body would be a different self, each thought would be a different self. Finally, if the self were the aggregates, it would no longer be said that possesses the aggregates. You could no longer say my head, my thoughts, or my feelings, because those statements assume that the self and the aggregates are different from things. The self cannot be different from the aggregates either, however, because if it were, it would not have any of the aggregates' characteristics. It would not take birth, live, or die, because all the things that arise, abide, and cease are included in the five aggregates. The self would not be able to perform any function because everything that performs a function is included in the five aggregates. Rather than being a thing, it would be inert nothingness, like empty space. Thus, the self is not the same as the aggregates. It's not different from the aggregates, and there is no other possibility for how the self could exist in relation to the aggregates. Therefore, so the self would not really exist. It is simple as that. The second verse reads, if there is no me in the first place, how could be there anything that belongs to me? When me and mine are found to be peace, clinging to me and mine ceases. This verse is fairly easy to understand. Once we determine that there is no self, it necessarily follows that there is nothing belonging to the self. This shows us that all our possessiveness, attachment to the things we consider to be our own, is just as confused as the thought that we really exist in the first place. By listening to and reflecting upon these reasonings, however, we can develop the precise knowledge that me and mind do not genuinely exist, that their nature is peace beyond conceptual fabrication. This precise knowledge is enough to put a stop to our confused clinging to them as being real. And in fact, there is no other way to do so. You cannot stop clinging to the belief in me and mine until you are certain that they do not exist. Mere unsubstantiated faith in the Buddha's teaching of selflessness is not enough. The stronger your precise knowledge of selfness becomes. However, the weaker you cling to the true nature, to the true existence of the self becomes, then the easier it is to use your knowledge of selflessness as a remedy for the mistaken belief in self whenever you notice it arising. When you apply this remedy, clinging to the belief in self dissolves in the open, spacious, and relaxed certainty that the self is mere appearance. The union of appearance is emptiness. This is something you have to train in again and again. Some people might argue. There are yogas and yoginis who realize selflessness, and this proves that the self really does exist after all. Or else, who would be the ones who possess this realization? Nagarjuna answers this claim to the third verse. The one who do not cling to me or mind do not exist either. Those who do not cling to me or mind see accurately, so they do not see a self. We can apply the analysis from the first verse to the yogis and yoginis who realize selflessness and see that sincerely, since they are neither the same or nor different from the aggregates, they do not truly exist either. Therefore, these realized beings are also dependently arising mere appearances, conceptual designations that lack inherent nature. They are appearances emptiness. That they appear does not cause them to be true existence, and that they not truly exist does not prevent them from appearing, just as in the case of appearances in dreams. The last two lines in teach, the last lines teach how it is that yin yoga is realization of selfness prevents them from clinging to themselves as being to existence. The realization also prevents them from feeling proud as of a result of having accomplished it. Since they know that there is really one there who will realize anything, what reason would be to be proud? Conversely, as long as someone is proud of or attached to their accomplishments or meditative experiences, they should know that they have not yet really realized. The fourth verse, the first line of the fifth verse describe how the realization of selfness of the individual leads them from liberation to samsara. When one stops thinking of the inner and outer aggregates as being me or mine, all wrong views disappear, and once they have disappeared, birth and cycle existence stops. When karmic actions and mental afflictions cease, that is liberation. Just a small reading of the Sound of Wisdom, teachings of Noble Nagarjuna, fundamental wisdom of the middle way. That's it.